I grew up in California, in mostly the 70s and the 80s. I come from a biracial family. So my mom's of European descent, my dad's of Mexican American descent, and both multiple generations here in the United States. And so I think, it took me a long time to realize that my parents were kind of trailblazers, because they got married in 1965. So, a Chicano man and a European American, people call white. I don't like to call my mom a color in a crayon box, but that was ahead of the times. It took me took my 20s to really reflect upon that. My mid 20s, probably after I started teaching and really confronting issues of race. I went back to my own family history and was I was really shocked that I hadn't thought of that before. But I think that really formulated a lot of who I became, and I think that impacted me in a way where I was always listening to make sure I knew how people were speaking about race and ethnicity before I could feel comfortable. It certainly didn't help that all my cousins and myself growing up in the Bay Area in the 70s and 80s, none of us have Spanish. It was part of that language erasure model. So none of us could speak Spanish, so that added to the distance from feeling our Mexican American roots. At the same time, the brown skin's on the outside, so there was this reticence to embrace us in any other way. I think that helped me as a teacher to have that background and to have those difficulties, because I think many young people feel inadequate. I mean, it's part of our process growing up, or feel alienated or marginalized, especially youth of color in this country, especially poor youth, especially LGBTQ youth. So any youth that have been, marginalized in some way through the history of this country, I think that allowed me to have that empathy and understanding. It put me in a good spot to be a teacher. So because it also helped me always check that nasty thing we do as human beings, which is judge somebody by what they look like. Because I'm surprising to a lot of people. There's a lot of assumptions that are made about who I am, and so by living that, it made it easier for me to not do that same nasty habit and practice, which is to project what I think upon youth and to learn who they are authentically. Because that's what I wanted. I wanted a space. None of my teachers growing up would ever very rarely would tap into who I was as a young Mexican American kid growing up, or a biracial kid growing up. They wouldn't approach it, and so I never wanted that, because if somebody doesn't approach it, then who's gonna, of a teacher especially, and elders don't approach it with young people, then where are we going to learn? How do we really learn about who we are? Usually from media, and mainstream media is not the best way to learn about who you are as a person, especially the images I saw of being Mexican growing up. It was a real honor to design classes that were going to reflect the students within them and their history, the stories, their culture, their lived experiences now. And that's what we did. We did it through literature, we did it through social studies, we did it through art. And what ended up happening is the students found themselves, they were able to release themselves from any mainstream internalized oppressive type of experiences or thoughts about being Latino, which I was alluding to growing up. There's a bunch of real derogatory imagery out there about what it means to be Latino, and a lot of derogatory language, derogatory educational practices, within our history books and within our and the lack of Chicana, Latino, Latina authors. You're just having a dearth of voices, of multicultural voices, of of just multiple voices in general that fit our nation's, the way the nation is built and who's contributed to this wonderful nation. Having an absence of that says a lot. You know, we learn as much from what's not there as we do sometimes from what is there. So what we wanted to do was build, you know, experience that was going to correct that and was going to allow students to have those opportunities to see themselves and to grow from there too. It wasn't dogmatic in any way. It was led by the students. So if we found a project the students were going through, for instance, they wanted a positive representation of youth on their campus, we built something beautiful like the Unity Festival, which was a all-day hip-hop cultural event where students would go on stage, read spoken word poems, spit their own flow, you know, rap. We would do graffiti art. We would have workshops on cultural, some historical workshops, cultural workshops of many different ethnicities. Whatever the flavor of the students wanted, they produced it. They wrote the grants. They communicated with the politicians and with the local, the city parks and recreation folks to get the stage and the booths and all those wonderful things. They ran it. They had a budget. They had meetings. They had committees. They brought in the talent from all over the nation to also headline and perform, so that to even make it a more grand event. And that was the type of empowerment our program was about. That's the kind of leadership we were about, which was guiding more than leading, which was cultivating the students' sense of agency and empowerment. And what we found, and then we got the educational outcomes went through the roof. Students were graduating, in the high 90% from all of our high schools that we taught at. We had they were passing the tests. They were doing great in math, even though we didn't teach math. And it just, once our students saw themselves as scholars and as human beings, then the world in Tucson was a better place for it. But the beautiful part now is other places across the country want to know what we did, because of the unprecedented success with Latino youth. And this country is getting more and more Latino by the day. And just started my business of trying to share this information, do professional development with teaching as an education consultant. I started my own firm. It's called the Acosta Latino Learning Partnership. And I've started working with some school districts. I just came back from Milwaukee, some amazing educators there. And I'm hoping to start these, make these connections and continue these partnerships. I'm working in California. California just passed a ethnic studies policy for their schools. Texas has just passed a Mexican American studies policy for their schools. They need to be, right now they're electives. They need to be core credits, like our classes were core credits, because they deserve to be core credits. Our students were writing essays and doing projects that were, college level. Because that's the only model we had. So, and that's another thing that made our program unique was the fact that it was not only rooted in indigenous epistemology, so it's rooted in the teachings of this pre-Columbian experience in this country. There's things we can learn from the Aztec sunstone. There's things we can learn from the Maya writings and the codices that we used in the classroom, like the concept of in lakesh, tú eres mi otro yo, you are my other me. That principle of we should do everything for each other, with each other. Those were the principles in our classroom that I think that made us unique. But at the same time, our curriculum was also unique because there aren't ethnic studies textbooks for high school teachers out there. We had to craft everything, and most of the time we crafted from our college experiences. So our students were getting a college preparatory program while they were achieving this high level of academic success. So that's what we want to replicate around the country, and we also want to make sure that administrations and people that form education policy in this country treat these classes and treat this type of study and treat this type of education with the sincerity and the earnestness that it deserves, and that is to give it full high school credit for college and not just be marginalized as an elective. And because electives go away They come and they go at the whim of a lot of people. But history class and English class, they're rooted in schools, K-12. So and that's what our students need, and we've proven that. And so we're hoping to go around. I'm hoping to work with as many people as possible. Although it can be tiring at times, but it's inspiring once I'm there, because it's a way for our program to live on and to really help the future of this country deal humanely and respectfully with the academic and educational potential of Latino students.